Dr. Kang Minho straightened his black formal jacket one last time before stepping through the massive entrance of the Centauri Prime Art Auction House. The building stretched impossibly high above them, its crystalline walls pulsing with soft, blue light that seemed to come from within the structure itself. This was it, the most exclusive art event in the known galaxy, where pieces sold for more money than entire planets were worth, the moment they walked inside. Minho felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes upon them. The main hall was enormous, easily the size of 10 football stadiums, with floating platforms suspended at different levels throughout the space. Each platform held different species of aliens, all dressed in their finest ceremonial garments and dripping with jewelry that sparkled like captured starlight. Linoi walked beside him, her steps confident despite the obvious hostility surrounding them. She wore a simple black dress that seemed almost plain compared to the elaborate costumes round them, but Minho knew she had chosen it deliberately. Tonight wasn't about fitting in. It was about making a statement. The blue-skinned Vrex merchants dominated the lower platforms, their bald heads gleaming under the strange lighting. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with elongated limbs and faces that reminded Minho of ancient Earth sculptures. Their wealth was legendary throughout the galaxy. They controlled the spice trade routes that connected 17 different star systems. Above them, the insectoid hive queens held court, on platforms draped in silk that shimmered like oil on water. Each queen was surrounded by dozens of smaller worker drones, all moving in perfect synchronization. Their compound eyes reflected the light in mesmerizing patterns, and when they spoke, it sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The most mysterious attendees were the Luminari, beings of pure energy who appeared as shifting columns of light. They didn't need platforms at all, simply floating through the air like living Aurora displays. Minho had heard that a single Luminari could purchase an entire solar system without thinking twice a boo. The cost dot as they made their way toward the registration desk. The whispers began. Minho's translator earpiece crackled to life, picking up fragments of conversations in dozens of alien languages. Humans here? How did they even get past security? I heard their planet doesn't even have proper art schools. Primitive species. They only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. Nari's jaw tightened slightly, but she kept walking. Minho had seen her face down hostile alien creatures on archaeological digs across the galaxy. She wasn't about to be intimidated by some snobbish art collectors. A group of Rex nobles blocked their path, their blue skin darkening to purple, a sign of aggression Minho recognized from his years of diplomatic training. The largest of them, wearing a crown made of crystallized starlight, stepped forward. "Look, a human actually thinks it belongs here," he sneered, his voice coming through the translator with obvious disdain. "Did you get lost on your way to the CERN's quarters?" His companions erupted in laughter, a sound like breaking glass that made several nearby species wince. The Vrex found great amusement in their own perceived superiority. "Maybe she's here to clean the floors," added another Vrex, this one female with elaborate tattoos covering her arms. "I hear humans are good at manual labor." The crowd around them began to grow as more aliens stopped to watch the confrontation. Minho could feel the tension building like static electricity before a thunderstorm. He'd been in enough dangerous situations to recognize when things were about to get ugly. Nari finally spoke, her voice calm and steady. "We're here for the auction, same as everyone else." This caused another wave of laughter, even louder than before. A Hive Queen's drone buzzed forward, its mechanical voice joining the mockery. "Humans at an art auction? What could your species possibly understand about true artistic expression? You've barely left your home system. Your entire civilization is younger than some of the pieces being sold tonight," added a Luminari. its light flickering with what Minho assumed was amusement. The crowd pressed closer, and Minho could sense Nari's breathing becoming more controlled, a technique she used when preparing for action. He'd seen her use it before when they were surrounded by hostile aliens on remote planets. That's when the auction house director noticed the commotion. The creature was unlike anything Minho had ever seen. Easily 12 feet tall with a body, like a giant octopus, but covered in scales that shifted color with its mood. Currently, those scales were a deep red, indicating annoyance. "What is the meaning of this disturbance?" the director demanded, his tentacles writhing as he approached. When he saw Minho and Nari at the center of the crowd, his scales darkened. Further, humans. How did humans gain access to this establishment? "We have legitimate business here," Minho replied firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had negotiated with alien ambassadors and survived. Encounters with cosmic horrors in the deepest regions of space. The director's tentacles curled in what Minho recognized as a dismissive gesture. "Humans are not typically welcome at such events. Your species lacks the cultural sophistication to appreciate true art. Perhaps you've made an error in your navigation systems." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Minho felt his own temper rising, but Nari placed a gentle hand on his arm. She had something planned, and he knew better than to interfere when she was working. "We'll see about that," Nari said quietly, her words barely audible above the crowd's mockery. But Minho caught the steel in her voice, the same tone she used when she was about to prove her critics spectacularly wrong. The auction was about to begin, and Minho had a feeling that everyone in this room was about to learn something very important about underestimating humans. The massive auction hall suddenly went completely quiet. It was the kind of silence that made your ears ring. Thousands of alien beings holding their breath at the same time. The floating platform stopped moving, the luminae stopped flickering, and even the Hive Queen drones ceased their constant buzzing. Everyone knew what was coming next. High above the crowd, a holographic projector hummed to life. The air in the center of the hall began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Slowly, an image began to form. Not just any image, but something so beautiful it made several aliens gasp audibly. The painting appeared to float in midair, rotating slowly so everyone could see it from every angle. It was called The Last Dawn, and Minho had never seen anything like it in all his years exploring the galaxy. The artwork showed a massive star in its final moments of life. But instead of looking destructive or frightening, it was absolutely magnificent. Golden light poured from the dying star like liquid fire, creating streams and rivers of brilliance that flowed across the cosmic canvas. The colors were impossible, golds that seemed to glow from within, purples deeper than the deepest ocean, and blues that reminded Minho of Earth's sky just before sunrise round the star. Cosmic dust and gas swirled in patterns that looked almost like a dance, as if the universe itself was celebrating this moment of transformation. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all species," the auctioneer announced, his voice echoing through the silent hall. He was a tall, thin alien with silver skin and eyes like black diamonds. Tonight's centerpiece represents one of the greatest mysteries in galactic art history. The painting continued to rotate, and Minho noticed something incredible. The artwork seemed to be alive. The golden streams of light appeared to flow and move. The cosmic dust shifted and swirled, and the colors seemed to breathe like a living thing. It was as if someone had captured a moment in time and made it eternal. "This masterpiece was discovered 3 years ago," the auctioneer continued, "floating in a derelict spacecraft near the Veil Nebula. The ship was damaged beyond repair, its crew long gone, but this painting survived in perfect condition. Our best experts have analyzed it for months, and we can confirm it represents artistic achievement beyond any known civilization. A murmur ran through the crowd. The Veil Nebula was one of the most dangerous regions in the galaxy, filled with spatial anomalies and cosmic storms that could tear apart even the most advanced starships. What kind of being could have created something so beautiful in such a hostile environment? Look at the technique, whispered a four-armed art critic sitting near Nari and Minho. There are no brush strokes visible anywhere. The paint seems to have been applied at a molecular level, and those colors, they're not just pigments, they're somehow infused with actual starlight. Minho leaned forward, studying the painting. More closely, the critic was right. This wasn't just paint on canvas. Somehow, the artist had captured real cosmic energy and made it part of the artwork. The golden light streaming from the star wasn't just painted. It was actually glowing with the same energy that powered real suns. The composition is perfect, added another expert. This one a crystalline being whose body chimed softly when she moved, the way the eye is drawn from the dying star to the swirling dust clouds, then back to the center. It creates a sense of movement that's almost hypnotic. Nari sat perfectly still, but Minho could see her hands trembling slightly in her lap. He glanced at her face and saw something he'd never seen before. She looked nervous, excited, and proud all at the same time. The emotional complexity is what truly sets this piece apart. The auctioneer continued. While the subject matter is the death of a star, typically a violent, destructive event, the artist has somehow made it beautiful. They've captured not just the physical process of stellar collapse, but the emotional meaning of endings and new beginnings. The luminary beings began to pulse in unison, their light synchronizing with the glow from the painting. It was their way of showing deep appreciation for artwork that moved them. Several hive queens chittered softly to each other, a sound like wind chimes that indicated fascination. No known species has ever achieved this level of emotional sophistication in their art, declared a Vrex art historian. The technical mastery is impressive, but the way this piece makes you feel, that's something beyond mere skill. Minho felt it too, looking at the painting. He could almost hear the cosmic winds blowing through the nebula, feel the heat of the dying star on his face, and sense the profound sadness and beauty of a sun's final moments. It was like the artist had reached into the heart of the universe and pulled out a piece of pure emotion. Opening bid, the auctioneer announced, raising his gavel, 50 million galactic credits. The response was immediate and explosive. Bidding. Paddles shot up across the hall like a forest of trees. The Vrex crown prince, his blue skin now flushed with excitement, raised his paddle high. A hive queen's representative buzzed forward, her compound eyes reflecting the painting's glow. Even the normally calm luminary began pulsing more rapidly, indicating their desire to own the piece. 60 million. Called out a voice from the upper platforms. 75 million. Counted another. 100 million galactic credits. Shouted the Vrex prince, his voice carrying across the hall. The numbers climbed rapidly. Minho had seen expensive art before, but nothing like this. These beings were bidding amounts that could buy entire fleets of starships. Enough money to fund colonies on a dozen worlds. 150 million, 200 million, 250 million galactic credits. Nari watched the bidding war with intense focus, her eyes following each raised paddle. Minho squeezed her shoulder supportively, feeling the tension in her muscles. Whatever was about to happen, he knew it would change everything. The technique is impossible, whispered the four-armed critic, shaking his head in amazement. No species we know could create something this emotionally complex, this level of artistic vision. It's beyond anything we've seen in 10,000 years of galactic civilization. The bidding continued to climb. And Minho realized they were witnessing history being made. But he also knew that the real history was sitting right beside him. Watching her creation sell for prices that defied imagination, the bidding war was getting intense. 500 million galactic credits. More money than most planets saw in a lifetime. The Vrex Prince was sweating through his blue skin, his breathing heavy as he held his paddle high. A Hive Queen had just outbid him, her drones buzzing frantically. Round her platform, the Luminari were pulsing so rapidly they looked like strobe lights, their energy forms stretching and contracting with excitement. That's when Nari stood up. The movement was simple, quiet, but somehow it cut through all. The chaos like a knife. The auctioneer's diamond black eyes locked onto her immediately. One by one, aliens throughout the massive hall began to notice the human woman rising from her seat. The bidding paddles slowly lowered as thousands of alien faces turned toward her. What is that primitive doing? Hissed a Vrex noble. Does she think she can bid? Chattered a Hive Queen drone. Minho felt his heart racing. He knew Nari well enough to recognize the look on her face. She was about to do something that would change everything. I need to speak with the auction director, Nari said, her voice somehow carrying across the enormous hall despite the fact that she wasn't shouting. There was something in her tone, a confidence that made even the most arrogant aliens pause. The auctioneer's silver skin darkened with annoyance. Madam, this is highly irregular. The bidding is still in progress. Security, he called out, gesturing toward the armed guards stationed round the hall. These weren't ordinary security guards. They were Corvan warriors. -1 for tall reptilian beings with scales-like armor and energy weapons that could cut through starship hulls, but Nari was already moving. She walked down the aisle toward the front of the hall, her steps confident and purposeful. In her hands, she carried a black document case that seemed to gleam under the strange lighting. The Corvan guards started moving toward her, their heavy footsteps echoing through the hall. Wait, Nari called out, her voice now strong and clear enough to reach every corner of the massive space. She stopped directly in front of the holographic display where the last dawn continued to rotate slowly, its golden light casting shifting shadows across her face. The entire hall held its breath. Minho could hear his own heartbeat pounding. In his ears, I am Nari, she announced, looking up at the painting that floated above her head. And I created that painting. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The hall erupted in chaos, unlike anything Minho had ever witnessed. Aliens didn't just talk. They screamed, roared, chattered, buzzed, and made sounds that his translator couldn't even process. The Vrex Prince's blue skin turned deep purple, a sign of extreme age, and he began shouting something about human lies and deception. Impossible, he roared, his voice carrying over the crowd. Humans lack the artistic sophistication for such work. You've been a spacefaring species for less than a century. A Hive Queen's entire swarm of drones took flight, creating a buzzing cloud that sounded like a massive engine. Several luminari flickered so rapidly they looked like they might explode. The crystalline beings were chiming in harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. Lies, screamed a four-armed alien from the upper platforms. No human could create something so emotionally complex. She's trying to steal credit for the greatest masterpiece in galactic history, added another voice. The Corvan security guards were almost to her, their weapons drawn and glowing with deadly energy. But Nari calmly opened her document case, revealing neat stacks of papers, data chips, and scanning equipment that looked far too advanced for most humans to understand. These are my authentication certificates, she said, her voice somehow cutting through the chaos. Biometric signatures, genetic markers, and detailed creation logs documenting every step of the artistic process. The auction director, the massive, octopus-like creature with color-changing scales, slithered forward, his tentacles writhing with what Minho recognized as extreme agitation. This is preposterous. Even if you somehow acquired false documentation, then scan me. Nari interrupted, pointing toward the authentication station near the front of the hall. It was a complex piece of technology that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a quantum computer. Use your own equipment. Check my genetic markers against the painting itself. The director's scales shifted through several colors, before settling on a deep red. He was clearly furious, but he was also curious. In all his years running the most prestigious art auction in the galaxy, he'd never encountered anything like this. "Very well," he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "But when this proves you're lying, you'll be banned from every art establishment in the galaxy." Nari walked calmly to the authentication station. The machine was enormous, covered in sensors and scanning devices that could analyze everything, from DNA to quantum signatures. She placed her hands on the scanning pads and looked directly into the optical sensors. The hall fell silent again. But this time it was different. This wasn't the quiet of anticipation. It was the silence of barely contained panic. Every alien in the room knew what was about to happen, and none of them wanted to believe it. The scanners hummed to life, bathing Nari in blue light that made her skin glow. Above them, additional scanners focused on the painting, analyzing every molecule of paint, every trace of cosmic energy embedded in the artwork. Minho watched the scanning process with growing amazement. He'd seen this technology before during his archaeological expeditions, but never used for something this important. The machine was comparing Nari's genetic signature to microscopic traces of DNA that would have been left by the artist during the creation process. It was analyzing her brainwave patterns and comparing them to the neural signature embedded in the painting itself, something that happened naturally when an artist poured their soul into their work. The minutes stretched. Like hours, aliens throughout the hall began to shift nervously. The Vrex Prince's purple skin was slowly returning to blue, but his eyes remained fixed on the scanning station. The Hive Queens had recalled their drones, and even the Luminari had stopped their frantic pulsing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the authentication system chimed. The sound was clear, pure, and unmistakable, the tone it made when a perfect match was confirmed. "Genetic match confirmed," the machine announced in a voice that echoed throughout the hall. "Artist identification, Lee Nori. Human, Earth origin. Neural signature match, 99.97% certainty. Biometric authentication, verified. Artistic ownership, confirmed." The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if every alien in the hall had suddenly forgotten how to breathe. Minho could hear his own heartbeat, Nari's quiet breathing, and the soft hum of the holographic projectors. Nothing else stopped the greatest masterpiece in galactic history, a painting that had baffled experts for years, that represented artistic achievement beyond any known civilization, had been created by a human, a species that most of these aliens had dismissed as primitive just minutes before. Nari stood beside the authentication station, her hand still on the scanning pad, looking up at her creation with quiet pride. The golden light from the last dawn continued to flow and dance, but now it seemed to be celebrating alongside her. The universe had just shifted, and everyone in the hall knew it. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, the Hive Queen's representative moved forward, her massive compound eyes, each one the size of a dinner plate, reflected the golden light from Nori's painting. When she spoke, Her voice carried a mixture of confusion and something that sounded almost like respect. "How?" she demanded, her mechanical translator struggling to convey the emotion behind her words. "How did a human, a species we considered barely civilized, create something that our greatest artists have spent centuries trying to understand?" Nari stepped forward, and Minho could see her confidence growing with each word. The initial shock of her revelation was wearing off, replaced by the quiet pride of someone who had just proven the entire galaxy wrong. 5 years ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the massive hall. "I was part of an archaeological expedition studying ancient progenitor ruins. We were searching for artifacts from the first civilization to achieve faster-than-light travel. Our research vessel, the Soul Explorer, was a small ship. Nothing fancy. Just a converted cargo hauler with upgraded sensors and a crew of 12. The aliens throughout the hall began to lean forward, captivated despite themselves. Even the arrogant Vrex Prince, his skin now returned to its normal blue color, was listening intently. We were investigating a dead system near the Veil Nebula. Nari continued, 3 lifeless planets orbiting a dying red giant star. The progenitors had built a research station there billions of years ago, and we thought we might find something useful in the ruins. Minho remembered that mission well. He'd been the expedition's lead archaeologist, and he'd been excited about the potential discoveries. The progenitors were still a mystery, an ancient race that had vanished long before. Most current civilizations had even evolved. But space near the Veil Nebula is dangerous, Nari went on. Cosmic storms, gravity waves, temporal anomalies that can tear apart starships. We knew the risks. But the potential discovery was worth it. She paused, her eyes distant as she relived the memory. 3 days into our survey, our sensors detected something incredible. The star wasn't just dying. It was about to go supernova. We had maybe hours before it exploded. A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew how dangerous supernovas were. The explosion of a single star could sterilize entire solar systems, turning planets into lifeless rocks. We tried to leave immediately. Nari continued, but that's when we discovered the temporal distortion field. The star's impending death was warping space-time itself, creating a bubble where time moved differently. What should have been hours stretched into subjective months. The Luminari beings began to pulse with interest. As energy creatures, they understood temporal mechanics better than most species. Several of them drifted closer, their forms shifting and flowing like living roar. Our engines were damaged by the distortion field, Nari explained. Dr. Kang and our engineering team worked round the clock to repair them. But I'm not an engineer. I'm an artist. So while they worked on getting us out of there, I did the only thing I could do. She gestured toward the painting floating above them. I painted. But why? Asked a crystalline being, her body chiming softly. Why waste time on art when you were facing death? Nari smiled, and for the first time since entering the auction hall, she looked completely at peace. Because I had to capture something no other species has ever seen. The exact moment when destruction becomes beauty. The hall fell silent again. But this time it was the silence of beings trying to understand something completely fun too. Their way of thinking. For months, we watched that star die in slow motion. Nari said, her voice growing stronger. Most of my colleagues saw it as a cosmic disaster, a violent explosion that would destroy everything with it. In dozens of light years, but I saw something else. She looked up at her painting, and Minho could see tears forming in her eyes. I saw the star giving everything it had to create something new. All that energy, all that matter, spreading out into space to eventually become new stars, new planets, new life. It wasn't destruction, It was transformation of Rex Noble, not the prince. But an older female with intricate tattoos covering her arms stepped forward. "You're saying you found beauty in death. I found beauty in sacrifice." Nari replied. "That star lived for billions of years, burning quietly, providing light and heat to whatever planets might have orbited it. And when its time came, it didn't just fade away. It went out in a blaze of glory that would seed the universe with the building blocks of new worlds." The Hive Queen's representative made a sound that the translator couldn't process, something between a hum and a whistle. "This is unprecedented. Our species creates art to document achievement, to display power, to show technical mastery. But you created art to find meaning in suffering. We transform everything into art." Nari said simply. "Love, loss, fear, hope. We take the raw experience of existence and make it beautiful. That's what humans do, a luminary being. Its energy form flickering with what might have been understanding, drifted closer. Your species, you transform pain into art. We transform everything into art." Nari repeated. "When we lose someone we love, we write songs about them. When we face terrible challenges, we paint pictures of our struggles. When we experience joy, we dance and sing and create stories. Art isn't just decoration for us. It's how we make sense of the universe." Minho stepped forward, adding his voice to hers. "I was there when Nari painted The Last Dawn. I watched her work for days, sometimes barely stopping to eat or sleep. She wasn't just copying what she saw. She was interpreting it, finding meaning in it, showing us how something terrifying could also be beautiful." "The technical skill is impressive," admitted a four-armed art critic. "But the emotional complexity, that's what makes this piece truly extraordinary. No other species we know can look at death and see rebirth, look at ending and see beginning." Nari nodded. "That's because most species see the universe as something that happens to them. Humans see it as something we're part of. We don't just observe cosmic events, we feel them. We connect with them emotionally. We find our place in the grand story of existence." The Vrex prince, who had been silent for several minutes, finally spoke. "So when you watched that star die, I watched it become part of something bigger." Nari finished. "I saw the universe making room for a new life, new possibilities, new stories, and I knew I had to capture that moment. Not just the physical event, but the emotional truth of it." She looked round the hall at the thousands of alien faces staring back at her. "That's what makes this painting valuable. It's not just a picture of a dying star. It's a human perspective on the meaning of existence itself, and apparently, that's something worth 500 million credits." The silence that followed was different from before, this time. It wasn't shock or disbelief. It was understanding, or at least the beginning of understanding. For the first time in their lives, these alien beings were seeing the universe through human eyes, and they were starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, there was something they could learn from the species they had dismissed as primitive. The transformation was immediate and breathtaking. As soon as Nari finished explaining her story, the entire auction hall erupted into chaos. But this time, it was a different kind of chaos. Instead of mockery and disbelief, there was desperate hunger in the aliens' eyes. They had just witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about art, about emotion, about the universe itself. The auctioneer, still struggling to process what had just happened, raised his gavel with shaking hands. "The bidding will now resume at 500 million credits," he announced, his silver skin flickering with uncertainty. But the aliens were already moving. The Vrex prince, who had been sneering at Nari just an hour earlier, shot to his feet, so quickly he nearly fell off his platform. His skin had shifted from blue to a deep purple, not from anger this time, but from intense excitement. 800 million credits, he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. I must have this piece. It represents a completely new form of artistic consciousness. The Hive Queen's representative burst forward, her compound eyes reflecting the golden light from the painting. 1 billion credits, she called out, her mechanical translator struggling to keep up with her rapid speech. The collective must study this human emotional complexity. 1.5 billion, counted a luminary collector, his energy form pulsing so rapidly he looked like a living strobe light. The bidding war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These weren't just wealthy beings competing for a pretty decoration. They were desperate to own a piece of something revolutionary. Nari watched in amazement as the numbers climbed higher and higher. 2 billion credits. Screamed a four-armed alien from the upper platforms. 2.1 billion. Roared a crystalline being, her body chimming like a bell. Minho could barely believe what he was witnessing. 2 billion credits was enough to buy an entire star system, complete with planets, moons, and orbital stations. These aliens were bidding amounts that could fund the colonization of a dozen worlds. The Vrex Prince was sweating now, his blue skin glistening under the strange lights. 2.2 billion, he gasped, his voice hoarse from shouting. But the luminary collector wasn't finished. His energy form expanded to twice its normal size, filling the air with brilliant light. 2.3 billion galactic credits, he announced, his voice echoing through the hall like thunder. The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien in the hall was staring at the luminary, waiting to see if anyone would dare go higher. The Vrex Prince looked like he might cry. The Hive Queen's representative was buzzing so loudly it sounded like a small engine. Finally, the auctioneer raised his gavel. Go in once, go in twice. The gavel fell with a sound like a gunshot. Sold to the Luminary Collective for 2.3 billion galactic credits. The hall exploded in applause. It wasn't the polite clapping you might expect at a fancy auction. It was thunderous, overwhelming, the sound of thousands of beings showing their respect and amazement. Nari stood in the center of it all, tears streaming down her face as she watched her painting, her expression of human emotion and perspective, become the most expensive artwork in galactic history. But that was just the beginning. Within days, the story of the Last Dawn had spread across every inhabited world in the galaxy. News reports, holographic documentaries, and scholarly articles analyzed every aspect of the painting and its human creator. Nari found herself the most famous artist in the known universe. And suddenly everyone wanted to understand what made human art so special. The Vrex Empire was the first to act. Their ambassador arrived at Earth just 3 weeks after the auction, carrying a contract that made Nari's eyes widen in disbelief. They wanted to commission an entire series of paintings, 12 pieces capturing different cosmic phenomena from a human perspective. The payment was enough to fund Earth's space program for the next century. We want to understand how your species sees the universe, the ambassador explained, his blue skin flickering with excitement. Your emotional interpretation of cosmic events could revolutionize our understanding of art itself. The Hive Queens were next. Their request was even more intriguing. They wanted Nari to create paintings that captured the concept of individual identity, something their collective consciousness had never experienced. We know what it means to be part of the whole, their representative explained through her translator, but we have never understood what it means to be alone, to be individual, to be yourself. Can you show us this in your art? Within months, Earth had become the most visited planet in the galaxy. Alien tourists arrived by the millions, not to see humanity's technology or military might, but to experience human art galleries, theaters, and concerts. They came to understand how a species that had only recently achieved interstellar travel could create art that moved them to tears. Museums across dozens of worlds scrambled to establish human art wings. The Galactic Museum on Centauri Prime dedicated an entire floor to human creativity, featuring everything from ancient cave paintings to modern holographic sculptures. Alien art critics wrote papers analyzing the emotional complexity of human expression, trying to understand how a species could find beauty in suffering and hope in despair. Minho found himself busier than ever, helping Nari establish the first interspecies art institute on a neutral world called Haven Prime. The planet had been chosen specifically for its beauty: 3 moons, aurora-filled skies, and landscapes that inspired creativity in beings of all species. The institute was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human artists taught alien students about emotional expression, while learning incredible new techniques from species who painted with sound waves, sculpted with pure light, and even created art using controlled gravity fields. "Watch this," said Taiwan, a young human painter who had arrived from Earth just last month. He was teaching a class of mixed alien students, showing them how to paint with traditional brushes and oils. "See how the brush moves? You're not just applying paint, you're expressing feeling. Each stroke carries emotion." A young Rex student, her skin cycling through different shades of blue as she concentrated, tried to copy his technique. "I do not understand," she said, her voice filled with frustration. "The technical execution is simple, but how do I put feeling into the paint?" "Think about something that makes you sad," Taiwan suggested. "Then let that sadness flow through your arm, into the brush, onto the canvas." The Rex student paused, her skin darkening to deep purple. Slowly, she began to paint, and as she did, something magical happened. The simple landscape she was creating began to carry weight, emotion, meaning. Other students gathered round to watch, amazed by the transformation. Meanwhile, human students were learning equally incredible techniques. Minho watched in fascination as a luminary artist taught a group of humans how to paint with pure energy, creating artworks that existed only as patterns of light and sound. "Your species thinks in terms of physical materials," the luminary explained, his energy form shifting into complex geometric patterns. "But art can be made from anything. Light, sound, gravity, even time itself. Watch." He began to move, and as he did, the air around him filled with colors that had no names, sounds that touched the soul, and patterns that seemed to exist in dimensions human eyes couldn't quite perceive. The human students watched in awe, their minds expanding to encompass new possibilities. Nari stood in her new studio, watching all of this with a smile on her face. The room was filled with art supplies from dozens of worlds, brushes made from crystalline fibers, paints that glowed with their own inner light, canvases woven from materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But what made her happiest wasn't the expensive equipment, or the fame, or even the money. It was the sight of humans and aliens working together, learning from each other, creating something entirely new. A young human woman was painting alongside a hive queen drone, both of them exploring the concept of individual versus collective identity. A Rex artist was teaching a group of humans how to paint with their emotions directly, bypassing the need for traditional tools. "We did it," Minho said, walking up beside her. "We found our place in the galaxy." Nari nodded, her eyes bright with tears of joy, not through conquest or technology, but through the simple act of showing others that even in a universe of infinite darkness, there's always room for one more dawn. Outside the studio windows, the 3 moons of Haven Prime were rising, their light painting the sky in shades of silver and gold. Alien and human students worked side by side, creating art that bridged the gap between species, that transformed different perspectives into shared understanding. The galaxy had learned what humans had always known, that the greatest strength wasn't in avoiding pain, but in transforming it into something beautiful. And in that transformation, they had found not just art, but hope for a future where all beings could create beauty together. The end.